Hello, and welcome to A Bite Out of Crime, a true crime series focused on criminals that used food as their primary murder weapon. Today's case is based on Zsuzsanna Fazekas, the ringleader in a group of women called the Angel Makers of Nagyrev, who killed dozens of abusive or unwanted relatives in Nagyrev, Hungary between 1914 and 1929. Zsuzsanna Fazekas was a midwife, or wise woman, that moved to Nagyrev in 1911. Not much is known about her, except that she was middle-aged, and allegedly had a husband that mysteriously disappeared. Also, she was very welcomed by the community, because there were few doctors, and she offered medical experience. She was especially embraced by the women in the village, that needed help when they had nowhere else to turn, and soon became someone they could talk to. For instance, from 1911 to 1929, she was imprisoned 10 times for performing illegal abortions, but was released by judges that supported abortion. In 1914, many of the men were sent to fight for Austria/Hungary in World War I, and Nagyrev was turned into a prisoner of war camp. During the war, many of the women began to have affairs with foreigners within the camp. This created an incredibly dangerous situation when the war was over, and the men returned. Many of them had physical wounds that did not heal correctly, and suffered from post-traumatic stress, which of course, there was no help for at the time. As a result, many of the men became violent, if they weren't already, and their wives wanted to escape them. But this was not a realistic option. As an alternative, Fazekas encouraged them to poison their husband instead, allegedly even saying, "Why put up with them?" Fazekas obtained arsenic by boiling fly paper, and scraping off the lethal adhesive residue, and women would often add the poison to their husband's food or water. While abusive husbands were the original target, soon women, children, and other unwanted relatives were also possible victims. These murders eventually became so prevalent that this village was also referred to as the murder district. Many of the murders went undetected, because the clerk that filed the deaths was Fazekas' cousin, who was probably sympathetic to this cause, as she murdered her much older husband when she was 18. As for how the Angel Makers were discovered, that is quite unclear. But one account is that a medical student in a neighboring town found high arsenic levels in a body that washed up on the riverbank, which led to an investigation. Due to the nature in which these murders were committed, there is no way to be certain how many people were killed exactly, but it is estimated to be about 300. However, there were only 40 confirmed deaths committed by the Angel Makers, but very few of them were convicted of any crime. While 35 women and 1 man were indicted for the murders, only 26 people were put on trial. And in that group, only 16 were imprisoned for life, and 2 were given the death penalty. Those present for the trial were allegedly shocked by the unapologetic demeanor these women displayed, but many of the women believed they were simply doing what they had to do. Whether that meant getting rid of an abusive husband, or killing a relative standing in between them and their inheritance. As for the ringleader in all this, when the police went to arrest Fazekas, she had already killed herself using arsenic. These murders are still remembered today and will forever be a significant part of Hungary's history. In fact, in 2004 a woman that lived in that village when she was a child, was interviewed by BBC, and remembers the husbands being much better towards their wives, when the Angel Makers were active. Thanks for watching A Bite Out of Crime. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. Considering divorce and/or fleeing wasn't an option, do you believe that some of these women were right, and their actions were justified? Or do you believe the few that were convicted of a crime deserve the sentence they received? Leave a comment down below.